Good evening and welcome to Emerging Visionaries. My name is Scott Quinn, and for a few more days I serve as Executive Director of the Marin Interfaith Council. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever you believe, whomever you love, welcome. This is your home. This is our 19th annual Visionary event, and thank you for coming. And before we go any further, many of our faith traditions have a tradition of Sabbath rest, and these devices have been working really hard lately, and they're yearning for a deep Sabbath rest for the next hour or so. So our theme for tonight is, where do we go from here? After a volatile, painful year and polarizing election, how do we navigate the future, and how do our faith traditions light a way forward? That's what we'll explore together tonight. And while our speakers tonight will offer their perspectives, the truth is we are all emerging visionaries. Each one of us is being called here and now to be a presence of healing and radical, active love in our world to bring wholeness. That's the spirit in which we gather. And as we gather, as always with MIC events, we begin with spiritual grounding, which will be offered by my friend and co-worker and MIC's interim executive director, Reverend Lynn Oldham Robinette.
Before I begin, I want to say that I am honored to have been asked to be the interim executive director. Many of you I've met tangentially or face-to-face. Please reach out, because in this interim, we would like to hear from many of you. So please reach out. And this is from Thich Nhat Hanh. Our true home is the present moment. To live in the present moment is a miracle. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now. Peace is all around us, in the world and in nature, and within us, in our bodies and our spirits. Once we learn to touch this peace, we will be healed and transformed. It is not a matter of faith. It is a matter of practice. I'd like to invite Sid Kaw. He is our board president, the MIC board president, who is a father of 3 young children, full-time employed, and now working on this of a search for a new director. And I know he will handle it with grace. So please come up.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Scott. I hope that's not the first time or the last time I say that tonight. But really, from the bottom of all of our hearts, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Marin Interfaith Council's fall event, Emerging Visionaries. My name is Sid, or my full name is Siddharth Kaur, and I represent our community as president of the MIC Board of Directors. My role with MIC was not by accident. I was introduced to our fearless leader of 8 years, the Reverend Scott Quinn, when trying to see how I could become more involved in the community following the murder and subsequent racial unrest surrounding the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Interfaith was natural for me because of the interfaith nature of my family. My wife, a practicing Catholic, and myself, a practicing Hindu, with 3 children who will grow within that beautiful complexity. Being involved for the past 4 years has brought me to this point in front of you, asking this basic question: why am I here? Well, I am here because I love my interfaith family, literally my own family and all of you. But more importantly, I would like to see that beautiful complexity express itself through our amazing organization, the Marin Interfaith Council. But foundationally, and with a lot of emotional weight, I am here because of our shared love of the beautiful soul that is the Reverend Scott Quinn. But before I talk about Scott, I do want to share some important news as it relates to MIC. As you may know, the Marin Interfaith Council finds itself in a time of transition. As you know, our beloved executive director, the Reverend Scott Quinn, is stepping down in a few short days, literally, to pursue his deepest calling in contemplative spirituality. But first, I want to focus your attention to the serious situation MIC finds itself in. The MIC board has identified 3 vital tasks that require its attention going forward. 1, updating and adapting the vision of MIC to reflect what our community truly needs. 2, and just as important, in light of the anticipated significant reduction from our primary donor, we are in very serious need of new sources of funding. And I pause on purpose to that point. And 3, as Lynn mentioned, while we are extremely grateful for her service as the interim executive director, we are also in search for a permanent executive director. In a sense, we cannot hire someone without clarity on our vision and funding. So you can imagine how vitally important our work is for the next several months. This will require us to do our work. This will require us to do some internal soul searching, but more importantly, it demands your presence, your input, and the activation of our entire community. There are several ways you can be a part of this exciting journey. Attend our events, like you are right now. Our events provide opportunities for dialogue and learning. Connect us with new partners. If you know of any organizations or individuals interested in interfaith work, please let us know. That could be me, Lynn, or anyone on the board. Join our board. We are looking for passionate community leaders to help guide MIC's future. If you're interested, please reach out to us. But ultimately, become a champion for MIC. We are actively fundraising to ensure MIC's continued success. Donations are crucial, and you can find the QR code on the pamphlet that you came in with, or you can donate online at marinifc.org. But, to my crucial point earlier, we are also especially interested in large institutional donors that can sustain MIC for years ahead. If you know who that might be, we need to know right now, so please let us know. You can expect to hear a lot more on all 3 fronts over the course of the next several months. We all want to see the beautifully complex and important work that MIC will continue in the years ahead, and we need your help. Of course, MIC would not be possible without the guidance of Scott. As we mentioned in the past, for many of us on the board, it is truly hard to imagine MIC without Scott. For the past 8 years, he has been both the public face of MIC and its heart and soul. Under Scott's leadership, MIC has achieved incredible things. Scott has spearheaded initiatives like the public service announcement, "We All Belong," which got the Bay Area Interfaith Councils together to spread a message against hate, against Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and Asian hate specifically. Love Lives in Marin gatherings, fostering inclusivity across faith traditions. He guided us through Visioning Interfaith 3.0, a project that solidified core principles of collaboration and interfaith understanding. He incubated Project Adapt, sparking vital conversations about climate resilience. He championed racial justice initiatives, especially in light of the national unrest following the murder of George Floyd. The Get to Know Your Neighbor's Faith program introduced our communities to the faiths and faith perspectives of community leaders and members throughout our county. He built a rapid response team dedicated to immigrant rights. And with MIC serving as fiscal sponsor of the street chaplaincy, he worked with them through several challenges and recently helped them find a new home with the First Presbyterian Church of San Rafael to continue the mission of bringing compassionate spiritual care to unsheltered and temporarily sheltered persons in Marin County, and building community between homeless persons and non-homeless faith communities and organizations. It's a lot. I just named 8 things, and I'm pretty sure I didn't name everything. As the Reverend Lynn Oldham Robinette, who you just heard, our new interim executive director, aptly said, Scott created the framework for people to come together. He empowered others to collaborate and make a difference. I'll say that one more time because I thought it was succinctly and beautifully said. Scott created the framework for people to come together. He empowered others to collaborate and make a difference. And thank you, Lynn, for sharing that thought with us. While Scott does leave a significant void, we are deeply fortunate to have Lynn leading us through this period. She's already a familiar face to many of you, and her dedication to interfaith work is unwavering. The board will work with Lynn to ensure that we continue to see through our 3 vital tasks. And as a way to honor this transition from Lynn to Scott, I would like to invite both of them up to the stage so I can present a small token of our appreciation to both of you. Scott, when I see you, I see MIC. When we are in discussion one-on-one or as a board, I see and hear a teacher, someone who is emotionally and intellectually in tune with those in front of him. I see someone with the values of presence, silence, gratitude, compassion, humility, patience, simplicity, solitude, community. And so it makes so much sense for you to continue the work of guiding others through their journey of contemplative spirituality. Scott, we'll be presenting you a gift to one of the restaurants that both you and her frequent. But we thought it would be appropriate to present the book, Everything Could Be a Prayer, by Craig Yinks, to both Scott and Lynn. And I'll quickly read the summary of this book. Through radiant woodblock prints of these and other icons of faith, artist Craig Yinks ushers us into God's presence. In Everything Could Be a Prayer, mystics who have communed with Christ and worked for justice, mercy, and liberation come alive. Yinks carves images onto blocks of wood or linoleum and then inks and prints them on paper. The resplendent portraits of mystics and justice seekers that result lead us into visio divina, or sacred seeing. This form of ancient Christian prayer in which one meditates on a work of art moves us into sacred reflection and action. And so I thought, how appropriate, because when I think of Scott, that's what I think of, sacred reflection and action, both coming from him and guided by him to us and those that you will be guiding going forward. So I'd like to present this to you. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, and this is a symbol of our transition to Lynn as well. And just really quickly, when I see Scott and Lynn, I see 2 faith leaders who also have communed with Christ and worked for justice, mercy, and liberation in the diverse interfaith community that is MIC. So please join me in a round of applause as we honor both Scott and Lynn for your tireless efforts to make all of this possible. Now let's move forward together, building upon Scott's legacy and creating an even more inclusive and welcoming Marin County. And as odd as it is to say this is the last time I will say this. Please join me in welcoming our Executive Director, the Reverend Scott Quinn, to the stage to present to you our 19th annual fall event, Emerging Visionaries.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sid. That was lovely. And just a special word of welcome. I did get to talk last week with my predecessor, the Reverend Carol Hovis, that I know a lot of you know, and she sends her love from Asheville, North Carolina, where she and her husband, Chris, are recovering from Hurricane Helene, but are doing all right. So you're really, all of you are part of this one long legacy of interfaith in this county. And it continues and will emerge and evolve into something better than it's ever been before, thanks to wonderful leaders like Sid and Lynn and our wonderful board of directors and all the people here in this room. So thank you for your loving care in continuing to live the spirit of this ministry. So let's do a few thank yous. So one of our very, very big thank yous is to Westminster Presbyterian Church for hosting us, both for Pastor Rob McClellan, and a special big thank you to Reverend Bethany Nelson for handling all of our logistics and being our liaison and doing our technology. Special thank you to all of our supporters for this event. So when I call your name or your organization's name, you're invited to rise, and all of y'all can just hold your applause until the end. Dominican Sisters of San Rafael, Jeff and Mabel Bialik, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Dominican University's Institute for Leadership Studies, EAH Housing, Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California, First Presbyterian Church of San Rafael, Interlude and Associates, International Association of Sufism, Jewish Family and Children's Services. A lot of these people are at the reception. Marin Community Foundation, Barbara Meisland, Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of San Rafael. Thank you so much, all of you MIC supporters. And I'd also like to acknowledge our MIC board members. So any of our board members here, if you would rise, please. And any past board members of MIC, if you would rise. Yeah. And to our volunteers tonight, any of you who are volunteering tonight? Oh, they're being shy. It's all right. And one more special thank you to my friend and coworker, Lynn, who's been such a wonderful partner all of these years. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your support and for carrying this ministry forward in your heart. And the most important thank you of all is to my partner, Herb Taylor. Without whom I would not be here tonight. So I love you. So now we turn our attention to our speakers. And we have two wonderful speakers tonight. And at the end of their conversation with each other, we'll have a time for you to have conversations with each other and to really let what they say spark you, challenge you, inspire you, raise questions for you. I'm sure they'll have answers to all of your burning questions within the first 5 minutes of their speaking, but just in case they don't, perhaps wow, Rob's saying 3 minutes. All right, good. So we'll have plenty of time for you to have some conversation amongst each other. So first we have my dear friend and our MIC board member, Rabbi Cantor Ilana Rosen-Brown. She's eager always to share her love of teaching and learning with students of all ages. She recently celebrated her 10-year anniversary with Congregation Road of Shalom and feels blessed to call this community home. At Road of Shalom, Rabbi Ilana leads adult learning and social justice initiatives and strives to create a community that is fully inclusive of interfaith, Jewish, multi-heritage families. As I mentioned, she serves on the board of MIC and also the Interfaith Sustainable Food Collaborative, on the social justice leadership team of the RIC California, and she recently completed participation as a rabbinic fellow with 18 Doors, Resetting the Table, and the One America movement. A native East Coaster, Rabbi Ilana grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and holds a BA in History and Education from Middlebury College, Vermont. In addition to ordinations as rabbi and cantor and master's degrees in sacred music and Hebrew literature, Rabbi Ilana recently also completed a master's degree of integrative health studies from the California Institute of Integral Studies, where she focused on narrative healing techniques for addressing ambiguous loss and grief as a central experience of chronic illness. She devotes a significant portion of her rabbinate to holding space for grief work, and her thesis, while in cantorial school, focused on the use of music in expanding empathy, peace building, and dialogue across differences. This work remains foundational to her worldview and spiritual practice. Among other awards, she's a recipient of the Tisch Fellow, led by Rabbi Larry Hoffman, which supports the work of transformational rabbis. And alongside her deep love for Judaism, she's a practitioner of mindfulness meditation in both the Jewish and Buddhist traditions. She's grateful to her partner Dan for the joyous home they've created together with their cats Beniko and Sherwood and their new baby who just celebrated his first birthday, Malachi, or you can call him Kai. Rob McClellan has been the pastor here, the senior pastor and head of staff at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Tiburon since 2013. Prior to coming to California, he served in transitional roles in 2 churches in the greater Philadelphia area. And there, Rob also worked with the Interfaith Center of Greater Philadelphia in its high school youth program. His educational journey includes a BA in Communication Studies from the University of Iowa, an MA in Philanthropic Studies from Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis, an MA in Rhetoric from the University of Wisconsin, an MDiv from Columbia Theological Seminary, and a DMin from San Francisco Theological Seminary, where his dissertation focused on pilgrimage as a spiritual practice and portal to religious experience. Born and raised in the Midwest, Rob's spiritual grounding was established in the Presbyterian Church and nurtured by transformative experiences at a large YMCA camp. He's worked with youth and young adults in a variety of settings, and he has a passion for the environment, a special interest in Celtic spirituality. And like so many, Rob finds God in nature. And he's happily married to Sherry Hauser, also an ordained Presbyterian minister, serving here in Marin County. And together they have a son, Liam, born in 2012. So please welcome these very, very dear friends of the Marin Interfaith Council, Pastor Rob McClellan and Rabbi Cantor Ilana Rosen-Brown.
I didn't know we were doing pets. I have 3 cats. Yeah. We had 4, but we lost Sweet Pea a summer ago. Oh. Nothing's hard. Well, that's not true, but little is harder than losing a furry one. This is hard without a robe on. I get it. Thank you for coming tonight.
I feel like we could spend the evening talking about furry pets and animals and maybe bring some joy, but
As a conflict-avoidant person, I would love to do that. Building off of the Thich Nhat Hanh opening that we heard moments ago, why don't we start with the present? So how are you, both as a being, but also as a rabbi in this moment?
big question, and we have so much to cover. So dropping in, I will say, much like Sid, who I know spent the day with kids and work, I'm deep in the spiritual practice that many of us are involved in of caretaking, and there are different ways to caretake, but currently my moment-to-moment experience is caretaking a 1-year-old, which means not much sleep last night, and but needing how and I've read some about kind of the neurobiology of caretaking and mothering. And you don't have to be a biological mother for the brain to change in that way. But it really has changed my brain in this moment. So I was 9 years serving as a rabbi prior to this, and 1 year since having a child. And the experience of responding to world events is very different for me.
Yeah.
Because I try to elevate myself to think about what's happening, to be able to respond cognitively, spiritually, also from a heart space. But very often I'm just in the moment-to-moment of diapers and sleeplessness. So that's a very interesting way to walk through life. And certainly that's where I've been. It's buoyed me in different ways since the election. You also asked, where is our community right now? And we had some time to reflect together, and with Reverend Scott, we've all been through the last 3 elections now together. And I've spent a lot of time in this last week reflecting on, and I'm still in it, is this election, post-election of 2024, how does it feel different for our community from the aftermath of the 2020 election, where, of course, we were deep in the pandemic times, and the aftermath of 2016. And I think one thing that I'm feeling viscerally is, which may or may not be accurate because it's only been a week, I felt viscerally in 2016 the need to grieve collectively, felt like an expression that was coming from the Marin Interfaith community and the Jewish community. You'll remember we actually had a community gathering together to express everything that was on our hearts. And this time I felt a collective, maybe it was a breath, inhale, exhale, and a need to step back and observe, how is this moment different? What have I learned? What have we learned since 2016? What have we learned since 2020? Where are we and what now? And so I'm feeling some of that. In Judaism, we might call it tzimtzum, a stepping back to make space for something else. And then most specifically, I'll talk about Jewish voting patterns for one moment, because we are a small community. And in the United States, I believe No, this is the baby brain. I don't want to misquote a number of how many, but of course, Jews are only 2.4% of the United States populations, and only a certain percentage of those are of voting age. And we voted, I'm sure the numbers are still coming in, but 79% of the Jewish community in the United States voted for Harris. Now, that's fairly consistent with Jewish voting patterns over the years. And what's notable about that for our conversation tonight, because we're talking about polarization, anti-polarization, perception versus reality, is that I think in the weeks leading up to the election for the Jewish community, there was a lot of bluster and talk and perception of, was the community really going to shift and change? Was there going to be a lot of one-issue voting for Trump, which is its own perception versus reality? But what we saw was that this the conversation and the energy that went towards that question, in the end, the voting patterns were similar. And I think that gives us a lot of pause for reflection as well in terms of what's reality and what's fervent fear-mongering and conversation, that's perception, that's happening. That might be too pointed a way of saying it, but it did give me pause this week in light of our conversation.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
where are you?
Where am I? It's funny that you link it so directly to parenting. I have found over these last, I have a 12-year-old, so same thing, 3 elections. I have often found myself sleeping in his room during election week.
Oh.
And I don't know why, but I feel some need to be close to him when people are making decisions about the world he'll inherit. I don't know, it's been a bodily response more than an intellectual one. But I avoided the question, as I often do. When I was in seminary, I went to go see a folk singer at a little artist town in the mountains of Georgia with some friends, and kind of off the beaten path, a place that marched to a different drum and a different time signature. And as the singer set up and started to sing in this small coffee shop, he looked out and he said, I've been really weary, but I'm feeling better now that I'm with you all. So if you asked how I am, I would say I'm really weary. But I feel better with you and being with you. Maybe we'll make some music even, I don't know. But those are 2 true statements. I've often found more of a kinship in some interreligious gatherings in communities than I have in some gatherings of those within my own household of faith. So it's especially important to be together, I think, tonight and in these times. How else am I? I would say I'm aware. I feel very aware of some things right now. Among them, I'm aware of our brokenness. And shortly after the election results, I sat down and started to review my notes. We had talked a couple of times about what we might talk about tonight. And it became quickly apparent that it didn't change anything of what I wanted to say, even though I was pretty unsure of what I wanted to say. And in fact, I don't want to send the message that somehow elections are inconsequential, because I believe that not at all to be true. But I actually wonder if Harris had won, if some of us would have been mistaken believing that nothing was wrong. And I feel there's some deep brokenness that's still flowing through us as peoples. It's flowing through me as a person. And I wonder if we wouldn't have attended to that. Had she won, we would have been tricked into thinking it was all okay. Bethany, it's funny, Bethany, a pastor here as well. God doesn't trust me. She knows what I'm going to say. Every major event that's happened in my 12 years here has happened the Sunday before I did not have to preach. Thank you for not trusting me. And she likewise quoted Marin County voting statistics, which actually fall about the statistical lines that you just quoted. Oh,
Oh, no.
I spilled on my own carpet.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to get mad? Thank you. It's just water. So part of what I'm aware of is there's diversity in this congregation too, in a way that I probably wasn't as acutely aware before. Mm-hmm. We're certainly not evenly spread out along the spectrum, but there is some diversity here, and that's so when I think about where are my people, well, which people? We have some, a minority, but some who are relieved, excited. Some who are confused, some who are angry, some who are despondent, everything in between. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've learned is not to make assumptions, because there's a bit of diversity there.
Yeah, and same for us. And we spent a lot of time when we were talking, the three of us, reflecting on that.
Yeah.
And wanting to honor, one of my coworkers told a story this past week about her daughter, who is 9 years old, who came home and was really concerned about a classmate in our Blue County whose parents had voted for Trump, and the school was making fun of this child.
We had that too.
The classmates, and I've heard this story a number of times, and I just want to, and my coworker called her mom and said, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you, and I'm worried about your child. And how are you doing? And this mother shared the pain of what it feels like to be, a Republican voter in this moment, and to have her voting decisions impact her daughter's social life. And the bullying that happens in school because of it. Yeah. So
we had a similar incident with a child in 2016. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm sure we all have so many examples, and I highlight because I think one of the things, and then I want to ask you, Rob, to go more deeply into what have you learned, and what do you think your congregation has learned in these last, has it been eight years going into this next 4 years, what have you learned? But I think that's one of the things we talked about, was learning to reflect on how are we participating in polarizing language, in name-calling, name-calling from a place, what do we do when we ourselves feel a righteous call, a moral call to stand up for what we believe, and yet the language sometimes contributes to this very polarization that we're now experiencing as contributing to so much brokenness.
Well, I think that's the important point, because I feel a tension within me between wanting to do the piece that makes everyone feel welcome, which is an easier place for me to go. The harder place is saying, as you are welcome here, I might need to say some difficult things to you. That will be the pole that will be more difficult for me. And how to do it in a way that is righteous, not self-righteous, but appropriately righteous, and not the kind of destructive way you were describing it. And I think, what have we learned? I'm not ready to answer that yet, actually, if I'm being honest. What I have learned is to be careful with that, about how I do that piece. I think I've grown up a little bit during this time.
Tell us a little more about what that means.
There were some, That's tough. I've had strong feelings over some of this stretch, and I wonder if I will voice them differently now, in a way that stands in truth and honors the dignity of the other. In fact, that's a way of loving them. I think Richard Rohr talks about not speaking out of unhealed anger. So I will have some anger, but I'm not going to open my mouth until it's healed, or at least partially healed. That would be one. One other thing I wanted to go back on is, I think in a way more interesting than where my people are, it's where we're going to be, and that's a really open question. Will we be able to provide a community that feels useful for people, or will we retreat to a space that feels really reassuring to some and useless to the other? But can we be useful to all and still have some integrity? These are all the questions. It's more questions. I don't have good answers, so I'm not going to answer the other one. Just lots of swirling. What about this question of how would you... we were always taught that being able to name what time it was not a chronological question, but a spiritual question. So how would you name what this moment is?
Ooh. I want to take different titles
You can take
from the
whatever titles
audience.
you want.
No, I was...
I spilled water. I mean, you could do whatever you want.
Well, I'll invite us all to hold that question. How would we name this time? I don't have a specific name for it, though I think it's clear, and any one of us who've been deep in listening to post-election analysis also know that we really are entering a new period of time. I don't want to use the word. Let me not even put it out there. But I think there are shifts in the electorate we're looking at. I think there's a deepening, what I feel when I think about 2016 versus today. I think there were nascent lessons that we were seeing, and when we look back in history, the culture wars of the 90s, those were deeply polarizing. There have been other polarizing moments. It's sometimes a fallacy, and it's often a fallacy, to say, no, this moment is worse than that moment. It is always much more multivocal than that. And yet, I think we're aware, and it's become a platitude to talk about how social media amplifies our difficulty talking to one another. I think in 2016, we were just understanding, some of how algorithms really worked to build these islands on the internet where we're talking in echo chambers. And I think now we actually pretty deeply understand that. We just don't understand how to break free of it. And I think, unfortunately, and I'm feeling this much more deeply in my own life, and the echo chambers of, conversations happening in our community, that not only do we not know how to break free of it, but because it's impacted our day-to-day life, and it's bled forth from the internet, that some people don't want to break free of it. So Rob and I have talked about a lot of texts to bring to tonight, and one of the texts is Leviticus 19:18, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what do you do in a world where people are starting to say, no, I'm not, not only am I just kind of ignoring that exists, but when you bring that text to me, I'm not interested in doing that anymore. And in fact, that lesson, that spiritual teaching, is not how we get ahead in the world, and I'm not interested anymore. And I think that, that's both happening in an explicit way in some ways from the national stage, but it's also really happening, and I'm experiencing it happening in all different issues where we feel righteous but have become dogmatic about politically, that if you don't think this way or feel this way or fight this fight in the way that I'm doing, if you don't use the language, so much so that if you use one word wrong that exists in an echo chamber of the internet where people identify where your positionality is because you use that one word, that people will refuse to speak to you. So I am deeply concerned about the license that we are all giving ourselves. And I say all because we're starting to swim in this changing landscape. I'm deeply concerned about the license we're giving ourselves to it's not just reaching across the aisle anymore. It's on any given issue that we might be passionate about, that we're not stretching ourselves to have conversations with people with whom we disagree. And it might bleed into our places of worship.
Do you get clergy ultimatums? So I see these things on social media where people will post among clergy groups, if you're a pastor in a church and you're not saying this on Sunday, then you're and that always hit me the wrong way, but I never knew why until somebody smarter than I articulated it and said, all ministry is contextual, and you don't know my people and what they need at any given moment and what it means to maybe speak about that issue to them and their place and their time. And why do you, my people have entrusted me with that, and you who've never met me don't get to tell me whether I've not lived up to it or not. I mean, do you get that? Does that go in your circles too, or is that an us problem?
Oh, well, I think I hear some people I know laughing. I know your laugh. I don't want to get too far into this because I want to make sure we talk about some texts, but I think it does concern us because it concerns the health of our communities.
Yep.
And to that point, I will answer because I think our communities and our faith communities can only stay healthy if we exercise the muscle of being able to hear things that are hard for us to hear, which is also exercising the muscle of humility, a deep spiritual value, and intellectual and cultural humility. So because I think in 2016, we heard from very few people in our community. It was almost like we had a mandate, a blue mandate at Road of Shalom, that we heard very strongly. So there hasn't been much that people have voiced. And of course, in this moment, and there's always so much to say about the Israel-Gaza war, which is the main reason we're not talking about it much tonight, because there's so much to say. But in this moment, that, of course, comes forward, and it's always come forward strongly around Israel. If my rabbi doesn't say what I want to hear, I am out of here, or maybe I'll get you fired.
Yeah. We do want to get to talking about what we think our particular traditions might have to offer this moment. So let's go there in a second. Maybe if I could just add a couple of things of what the moment feels like to me. There was a Swedish theologian named Christer Stendahl, who was the Bishop of Stockholm, and he said, love is measured by the amount of tension it can take, not by how it feels. And to me, this feels like a really tense time, and we're about to find out how much we really love each other. And I'm not sure, and it's much more fun to preach about that at a moment when it's easy to love each other, and much harder when it's a harder time. So I'd say, one, it's a tense time. Two, I mentioned brokenness, but what's unclear to me, and probably in any present moment, is whether the opening we're seeing is a wound or is it a birth canal? And both are very painful. And I think it probably won't be determined until we act in a way that determines what the pain is we're feeling. At least that's what I'm experiencing. The other thing that hits me about what kind of time this is and why I'm very reluctant about tonight actually is it feels like such a noisy time. And I've been overwhelmed by, since we've been talking a lot about the election, post-election, the sort of frantic content production, which is just an extension of how we seem to operate anyway, and poems and edicts, and I just wanted to be quiet. How many of you were at the Green Gulch Gleaning event? Anybody do that? It's a youth event through MIC. I was there with my son as a parent, not as a pastor, and we were late, and so we were hustling, and we, if you've ever been to Green Gulch, you park like, about a mile from, I have a 12-year-old teenager, and as we're walking, he just started whispering. I didn't tell him to be quiet. I didn't tell him Buddhists don't like noise. He could feel it because of the silence held in that place. And I think, even though I'm a speaker for a living, I'm not sure more words is what we need. But I want to hear some of yours. We have 10 minutes. I want to hear what you think your tradition, textual, ritual, practice-wise, has to offer us. What's your gift?
Well, I, of course, was diverted when I was reminded, which was something I knew, that your thesis was on pilgrimage. And that's a very deep spiritual practice for me. And I think a deep spiritual practice from Jewish tradition and all of our traditions. But I'm thinking of the 3 festivals and pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So I was diverted by that. But when we talked about how can practice help us in this moment, there's one text that I want to read, but I think we both agreed that it wasn't the text that was going to help us through this moment. But I do want to read a commentary on Love Your Neighbor as Yourself, because I think we are all trying in our own ways to do that in different ways now. I really, looking out at this group and knowing that we all love MIC very deeply and have for many, many, many years. I know this is a group that is continuing to endeavor to do so. So this is just a commentary from Nachmanides, who says, "This is hyperbole, for a human heart is not able to accept a command to love one's neighbor the way one loves oneself. It's too hard. Maybe we can't do it. There's going to be envy. There's going to be jealousy. There's going to be anger. Moreover, Rabbi Akiva has already come and taught, your life takes precedence over the life of your fellow. Rather, the commandment of the Torah means that one is to love one's fellow in all matters as one loves all good for oneself. It is possible, so I won't go into it too deeply because, of course, this is a few paragraphs, but what he means by this is drawing a distinction between the sentiment we might feel inside and how we turn what might be actually unequal, that we might not be able to fully love all of our neighbors or all of the strangers as we love ourselves, as the commandment said, but we can choose to give them the same love that we would want, in the giving of kindness, in the wanting them to have the things that we need to survive. So this is the distinction that Nachmanides draws. And then I just want to talk about 2 practices, and then I want to hear from you in the time we have left. One is the Jewish practice of storytelling, which some of us talked about, of course, storytelling is universal, talked about in our class Choosing Hope last week. But that storytelling, I think, has become very fraught in this time. We know that Democrats and Republicans have very different stories, and the more we tell the story, the louder it gets. And yet the only way we make sense of our experience and where we're going is through our sacred mythologies and the stories that we tell. And so I'm just inviting us into this question, and it's deep in terms of my interpretation of tradition. How am I going to tell the story? What text from my tradition gives me a story to understand this moment and can inspire my community and myself to re-story? This is Gloria Anzaldúa, who wrote a great book on restoring our lives and restoring our traditions. And so I think the practice of restoring is something we need right now. And then I also want to say prayer, which certainly for Jews is so hard for some people in the Jewish community because
It's not hard for us.
yeah, so that's why I get to speak for. Well, people probably interpreted that comment in different ways.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Some were like, it's really hard. Others were like, you're right, it's not hard for us. It's not as hard as it is for those Jews over there.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, I'm kidding. But really, to believe not that prayer is going to change the reality, but that prayer will change us, right? That prayer, it does change us. That choosing the prayers that we want to bring in to change us in our approach to this moment, whether it's of gratitude, whether it's really about peace, whether it's prayer that includes anger at God and the world and what our people are, collectively, what we human beings are doing, whatever it is, choose the prayers that you need for this moment and say them again and again and believe in the practice of prayer.
Sounds like you have something to teach us about prayer.
Who knows? But what about your tradition?
I'll share one text, a piece of a text, and then a couple of practices it makes me think of. So, this is called the parable of the sower. And Jesus is teaching, and they gather around him, and he says, listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Others fell on rocky ground where they didn't have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, 100-fold, 60, and 30. And then he goes on to say, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom, I don't like the word kingdom, we might say the reign or the way, or I've got a wonderful translation of the New Testament done by indigenous First Nations Christians, and they don't call it the kingdom, they call it the good road. I like that better, the good road. So the word of the good road, and they don't understand it. The evil one comes and snatches it away. What is sown in the heart, this is what is sown on the path. As for what's sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, but they don't have any roots, so it doesn't last. It only endures for a while. When trouble or persecution comes, that person immediately falls away. As for what's sown among the thorns, it's someone who hears the word but cares of the world, and the lure of wealth chokes the word and it yields nothing. But what's sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word of the good road and understands it, and it bears fruit and yields 100-fold, 60, and 30. And it seems to me we're a culture that's so obsessed with the right word. And as a preacher, someone sowing the right seed all the time. But I feel like this moment is a moment for us to cultivate our soil, which is our collective soul and our individual, do the inner work of our souls. Because if it was just about getting the right words and the right information, we wouldn't be in this place that we're in. The words are there, but I don't think we've cultivated the soil. Many of you are familiar with the work of Robert Putnam, who talks about social capital and the decline of the social fabric. He's got a new work that says, join or die, become a part of something. So let me offer just a couple of quick practices. I was a slightly above mediocre swimmer in high school, and they told us that American swimming lost its advantage in the world when it stopped putting in lots of yardage. They decided, we'll just do quality time, and everybody caught up. And what they realized is you just have to put in junk yardage. And I think as a people, we've stopped putting in junk yardage with each other. So my practices would be anything that our communities could do to put us back together with one another. So in Christianity, I think of the key spiritual practice of the potluck, which, if you grew up in Indiana, means you get together multi-generation for a meal, no religious stuff, just casseroles with cheese and chips melted on top. That's where the fabric is formed. 2 projects. So gleaning at Green Gulch, when you're shoulder to shoulder to somebody, just working, you're just talking, you're building the soil for the day when you have to have the talk. In pilgrimages, I think, literal and metaphorical, we have to start walking together. Lots of time, lots of steps, lots of small talk, which will lead to greater talk and maybe greater listening. I think what the practices have for us is a spaciousness of heart, and I think that's what we need now more than anything.
Thank you. The text I brought that I forgot to mention, and I'm going fast because we have 2 more minutes, rather than reflecting
I thought we were
on
done. This is
the
great.
beautiful offerings that you just gave us, but I want to make sure I get this text in, and some of us know it, and it's maybe a text we can use as we meet in all of those practices that I can't wait for the casserole. Cheese is my favorite. Benzoma Omer, Ezehu Chacham, Halomed Mikol Adam, Shene'emar, Mikol Milam Dai, Hiskalti Ki Edotecha Sicha Li. Benzoma said, who is wise? The person who learns from everyone, as it is said, from all who taught me, I have gained understanding. And I think we've really gone very, very far away from that teaching. Maybe it's always been hard. But I think we are feeling the pain of how far we've deviated from that teaching. And we need to say, when we have moral outrage, we need to be able to say it. This is not about flattening. This is not about a flattening of the experience of anger that people have, or a flattening of the rights in our country that we're working towards, or the wars that we want to end. But this is a reminder that we need to stay in conversation with one another, because we have a lot to teach one another, and we are not going to be able to transform ourselves or our world if we stay away from challenging one another and challenging conversations. And that's why this is where I wanted to end, and this is where we both wanted to end. Being in an interfaith community is so vitally important, and why, when you started by saying how inspirational it is, whether we wanted to go crawl into bed earlier this week or not, to be in this space re-energizes us.
Yes.
And I think it's because just by sitting down here, we know that we're saying yes to dialogue, and we know that we're saying, yes, I want to hear your experience, and I don't expect that it's the same as mine, and your experience matters to me. What you have to say matters, And I honor that and thank you for listening with an open heart. And that is the beauty of interfaith, and that is the beauty, I always love to say, every two people that sit down together is interfaith, interbeing, inter something, right? And we have so much to learn from one another, and so much is at stake when we say no
Yes.
to sitting down with one another. So much is at stake. And so thank God for the Marin Interfaith Council, and may we continue to build the energy for this work in Marin County and beyond.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Rob, Rabbi Alana. Let's also now have a chance for you to talk with one another. So you'll see on your program, there are starter questions, but you're not limited to your starter questions. What inspired you? What challenged you? What did you notice shift within you? What is one specific action you might take? So just take a few moments, one of those questions that's interesting to you, to have a short conversation with somebody next to you.
Anyway, should we bring it back? I don't know what the title is.
I will. I'll bring them back. Do you want me to bring them back before they leave, or you I'll just bring them back.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. I'm going to ask people to come up closer because we want to end with a moment of gratitude like the one where we began. So much gratitude for the Reverend Scott Quinn. So please come up a little bit closer. Ya la 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 la. 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 We can circle, ya la la la, or stay in your seats. We know it's a lot to circle, ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, you can all join. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. So I want to invite you with full presence to take a breath and an exhale and a deep breath and an exhale. And I'll invite you to hold in your heart first an expression of gratitude or a moment of connection you had with Scott, with Reverend Scott. And as we breathe in and out in this amazing and intimate community that Reverend Scott helped us to cultivate, hold that gratitude and that memory close. And now that you've located that memory, I invite you to hold in your heart a blessing for Reverend Scott as we send him on his way. We know he'll always be a part of our community, and yet he's moving on to share his gifts in other spaces. And while we'll miss him so deeply, we know the learning and the wisdom remains. So hold this blessing as we breathe together and send your blessing to Scott. We're filled with so much gratitude I invite Reverend Bethany to lead us in a song as we send you forth, Scott, with love and blessing and thank yous.
God be with you till we meet again. Loving counsels guide, uphold you. With the shepherd's care enfold you. God be with you till we meet again. God be with you till we meet again. Loving counsels guide, uphold you. With the shepherd's care enfold you. God be with you till we meet again. May it be so. Go in peace.
Don't go anywhere yet.
I actually had a very short benediction to offer you because I wanted to give you a blessing. Very short benediction. So this is what came to me this afternoon as we were starting to put on tablecloths and get ready, knowing the moment where we are and where we go from here. So receive this as a blessing from my heart to yours. When icy evil chills you to the bone, may friends wrap their like-hearted blanket around you and thaw your frigid soul. When patriarchal pushback pummels your peace, may Divine Mother tend you as you tantrum your tears, and may you imbibe her ferocious kindness, a power far greater than fear, greed, and grievance combined. When you find yourself somewhere under the rainbow and can't find a way to get over, may the blue bird of gratitude still find you and sing you into wholeness. When your faith is nowhere to be found, may that which your faith seeks find you. For you are already and always found in that which you ultimately seek, which is who you ultimately are. And when hope is dim and your vision dimmer, and the way forward lies behind you, may the one light shine your way into a timeless future, beyond polarities, beyond death, where love forever knows you as itself. Amen. Blessed be. Amen. Thank you for coming tonight.